Hello everybody, here we are today talking about Eddie Olczyk, a man of many talents. So before we get into talking about him, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So I know a lot of younger fans and then fans that are newer to the game probably are aware of Eddie Olczyk as a broadcaster, and that is completely fine. This video is here to talk about what he's done during his broadcasting days as well as his time before that. So kicking it off at a young age, at 17 he was selected to Team USA for the 1984 Olympics in Sarajevo. They didn't go on to win gold there, but still a big accomplishment for a young player. And with this, you would go on to see him selected 3rd overall in the 1984 draft by the Chicago Blackhawks, as the Illinois native had to be ecstatic to be drafted to the home team. And this was a draft class that featured Mario Lemieux, Luc Robitaille, and Brett Hull, just to name a few. So a pretty stacked draft class there. In year one, things went pretty well for Eddie as he had 20 goals, 30 assists for 50 points in 70 games played, as the Hawks would make the playoffs and go to the conference finals, where they would lose to the eventual champions, the Edmonton Oilers, in 6 games. No shame there. The Oilers were a great team during the 80s, a historic side, if you will, and Eddie ended up having 11 points in 15 games. But then you go into the 2 following seasons, 79 points and 51 points. Problem is, while Chicago is still making the playoffs, they have lost in the division semifinals back-to-back years. The Detroit Red Wings, the Toronto Maple Leafs are those thorns in your side, if you will, in this period, as Eddie still probably feeling pretty good about himself. A young player that is in his hometown, that is, again, probably thinking, like he said himself, he's going to get to play his entire career with one team. Doesn't really check out to be the case, as he's traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and in Toronto things go pretty well, especially individually, as in year 1, 42 goals, year 2, a 90-point season, and then in year 3, an 88-point campaign. Going into that 4th year, he is, again, younger player that's seen really good numbers, probably not too worried about a lot of things going on, but he's in the delivery room with his wife, who is having their 2nd son. The Toronto management at that time kept trying to get a hold of him, telling the nurses to get in there to talk to him. He goes on the phone while his wife is obviously trying to deliver their child, and they said, "Hey, you've been traded." So he goes back into the waiting room, the delivery room, and she just knows right away they've been traded. Where does he go? To the Winnipeg Jets. That's exactly right, as he ends up in Manitoba. In his time with the Jets, things went really well for him, and the team didn't really get a whole lot of playoff success. That would kind of be a trend in his career where he would see good numbers, but the team just wasn't able to move on in the playoffs besides just a few occasions. So he gets traded off to New York, and this is kind of the dark days of his NHL career at this period, as he ends up in Mike Keenan's doghouse, not something that is totally uncommon for a lot of players over their career, and he is part of the 1994 New York Rangers team that would win the Stanley Cup. However, originally his name was not slated to be put on there. He didn't hit the 40 games required or the 1 playoff appearance in the Stanley Cup final for that to happen. He played 37 games and only played 1 playoff game that wasn't in the Stanley Cup final, and just kind of an unfortunate situation, as you had seen a guy that before this was younger, that was able to produce, now not getting the minutes and just being a healthy scratch in a lot of situations. So thankfully he was traded out of New York, although again he was still put on the 94 team for the Cup. But who was it that came and saved the day? It was the Winnipeg Jets. And while he was with Winnipeg, things weren't particularly bad, as he would see, again, about a point per game as a player, and the team would make the playoffs one season where they would get knocked out early in the playoffs. Then, of course, after that, he would sign with the Los Angeles Kings. Didn't play a full season for them, but still was able to put up about 40 points in 60 games before being traded in the late 90s to the Pittsburgh Penguins. He would play part of 2 seasons with the Pens, and they would go to the playoffs both years. But can you guess what happens here next? Yeah, they really aren't able to do a whole lot, and they don't advance in the playoffs. But you would see Eddie ended up starting where it all began and finishing his career with the Chicago Blackhawks over the final 2 seasons of his career. The production over his final 3 seasons really did drop off quite a bit. However, by the time that he hung up his skates, things looked really good. He had about 800 points in just over 1,000 games played. And if you take out his final 3 seasons out of his 16-year career, he was close-ish to being about a point-per-game player, had about 750 points in about 880 games over those first 13 seasons, so an individual that saw a lot of success on the ice. And then after his playing career, he gets into broadcasting, which is the next step of his post-hockey playing days, as he goes to Pittsburgh, as he was already there before. And with his broadcasting career going kind of there, it kind of takes a weird twist, whereas in 2003, he is named as the Pittsburgh Penguins head coach, and the Pens did not do well in that time, going 23-47, 8-4 in year one. And then you had the lockout, which of course was a whole season without hockey for everybody. Then in 2005, unfortunately, he was fired as the team went 8-17-6 over their first stretch of the season with him. And I know a lot of people will look at this as a failure. He wasn't able to even coach 2 full seasons with the team. This team was going to be pretty bad, and I just view this as more of an interesting period than a tumultuous period. Now, during the time, Pittsburgh was just a dumpster fire in a lot of ways, but looking at what they became, it's just crazy to me that he's in this period where he's the head coach of guys like Mario Lemieux that he played with, that is also the owner of the team, and then other Hall of Famers like Mark Recchi in this time. And then you kind of get to see the beginning stages of the careers of Marc-Andre Fleury and Sidney Crosby during his tenure. So Crosby's first season came with him. Fleury got to spend 2 seasons with him, and it's just really cool to see these guys that had such a big impact, and Crosby still having a big impact for the Penguins in this period. And you also got to see Evgeny Malkin taken 2nd overall in the 2004 draft. So while things didn't go particularly well during this period, you would see Olczyk end up having a lasting impact as he got to deal and mold some of these younger players. They still would have been good without him, but yeah. Now, following his head coaching stint, he would never go on to coach again in the NHL as a head coach, but you would see his broadcasting days again open back up as in 2006 through 2022, I believe. He ended up calling games for the Hawks on NBC and ended up making a great pairing with Doc Emmerich. Again, a lot of great games, especially as a kid hearing Doc and Eddie in the booth. Just one of those things, when that was on the TV, you knew you wanted to listen in. And is again in a spot where he ended up having a massive impact on NBC as a broadcasting channel before going to TNT as the NBC on ESPN and all that stuff ended up ending, but still a very impactful time there as he molded a lot of the younger minds, especially guys that are about my age and gals, whatever, in a period where the league really needed to have a great step forward after the whole lockout. I think things ended up working out pretty well. Could be better, but compared to where they were, things have been a lot worse. So Eddie, of course, in that period of time afterwards, ends up leaving the Hawks and joining the Seattle Kraken, where he's called games now. So when it's all said and done, do I see Eddie as a guy that is the most influential person in NHL history? I don't. However, I look at a guy that had a really good career, an underrated career, that again was able to have an impact during this period of time where he was a player on multiple teams, and then go on to coach the team that was just an absolute dumpster fire as the Pittsburgh Penguins, that kind of blossomed into one of the better franchises of almost 20 years, about 15 years, and they were one of the better franchises during this period, and he had an impact there. More importantly, I look at his broadcasting and say this will have the biggest impact, and I think for a player, a lot of times you'll see top picks that are taken that don't pan out, and you might see guys that are able to have a good career, but then just kind of hide away in the shadows when their playing time is done. But with Olczyk, he ends up having 40 years where he looks like he's made a lasting impact on the league. And the great news is we could see even more of this, as his career should still go on for quite a bit of time, as he's just 57 years old. I know that he did battle cancer a few years ago, but he was able to beat the cancer. So when everybody got the news that he was cancer-free, I remember one of those people being me, being ecstatic about that, and I'm glad that he's in the booth. And I hope that we have more decades where we get to see him play, or not play, excuse me, but call plays, if you will. But yeah, this is just a quick recap of Eddie Olczyk's career in the hockey world, as he got to play over 15 seasons in the NHL, over 1,000 games, get kind of close to 1,000 career points, be an NHL coach, as well as a broadcaster for the better part of the 21st century. So a man that still has a lot of work to do, I'm hoping, and a guy that I hope to get to meet at some point in my life. So anyway, what are some stories you like about Eddie Olczyk over the entirety of his hockey days? Let me know that stuff down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, have a great night, and you go love hockey, alright? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.